the past 2 years, I've been working on a project on how music information is shared within the social network of adolescents. And for this particular presentation, I will focus on more specifically on one aspect, which is how the social environment contributes to shaping the music tastes of adolescents. And I hope it will provide some potential avenues for the improvement of music recommender systems. So how do we find the right music for us? So one possible solution is to provide users with personalized recommendations. So most commercial music recommendations are based on social or collaborative filtering, which makes sense since research in music sociology and psychology has shown that music appreciation was mostly based on not so much on the intrinsic characteristics of music, but rather on the values and beliefs it stands for. These recommender systems do have some limits. There's the cold start problem, which probably everybody is aware of, so I won't talk about it. But they also often provide recommendations that are obvious or not novel. So they tend to recommend mostly popular songs, and if they are very popular, probably users are already aware of them. So it's not very useful. Or if you use Amazon, you probably notice that if you look at a music album, they will often recommend other albums by the same artist, which is not really useful either. And they also assume that people have relatively stable tastes. Just like Mary said before, it's true for across context, but also for your whole life, you will carry your listening and purchase history. So there are some indications that these systems might not really be satisfactory for users. So research shows that most young adults continue to discover music primarily to friends and acquaintances and don't use to extensively music recommender systems. So how can we improve music recommender systems? So one way to find new avenues for an improvement of this system would be to study how people discover new music in real life, since music tastes are influenced by their interpersonal relationships, and also how they influence the music taste of others. So here are the research questions I will try to address in this presentation. So I I used the social network analysis for this research. Social network analysis provides a set of tools and theoretical concepts that researchers can use to describe and analyze social network. Sort of a tool that allows people to visually represent on a map their social network composed of close friends and relatives. So here's the timeline. I recruited the participants in a public high school located in downtown Montreal. So in qualitative research, we typically have very few participants, usually between 12 and 20 participants. I had 19. So we cannot generalize the results with such small samples. The idea is more to try to identify behaviors and to really try to understand these behaviors by collecting rich data. Well, in their sociograph, participants had to group or to think about how they could cluster people in their life. So they had to identify different social groups to which they belong. So they were asked for each of these social groups to say who in their mind had the most influence on others in terms of music. And they could obviously name themselves, which is what 4 participants did. But they were also asked to explain why in their mind these people had more influence than others. So it turns out that these people were, well, not surprisingly, these people were usually considered as having greater than average interest for music or enduring involvement in music. When participants will explain why someone is influential by just saying, he's the type of person who always has headphones. So that seemed like a good enough reason for inferring that this person was very involved with music. Or I think he spends a lot of time looking for things. On a regular basis, he checks music sites to see what has been released. Some were also experts to be, so they were planning on pursuing a music career. And I should specify a music career in jazz or popular music, because classical music is not so much interesting for adolescents. And some others were experts, what I call experts by proxy. These were people who had family members in the music industry, and they were perceived by their peers as having some sort of expertise because of that. And I should also mention that these people are opinion leaders, not trendsetters, which means that their sphere of influence was limited to a small group of close friends, and it was also limited to one or maybe two areas, like music and fashion maybe, but not in all areas. One said, for instance, well, she loves to talk about music, she loves helping others find new things. But they don't only provide recommendations, they expect you to listen to the music recommended. So one said, well, my father basically talks about it until I accept to listen to it. One participant explained, well, because Mark is even less mainstream than I am. I mean, he has even more music knowledge than I do. So when I listen to a song and he tells me, I hate this song because blah, 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 well, I don't listen to it the same way. You know, he really has more music knowledge. And another participant explained the influence one person has on her by simply saying, well, she is the one who unhooked me from the Jonas Brothers. So as I mentioned earlier, 4 participants claimed being music opinion leaders in their group of friends. So we compared their music information seeking behavior of the music information seeking behavior of other participants. It turned out that people who are not music opinion leaders mostly discover new music through serendipitous encounters and unsolicited recommendations. One participant said, well, I don't look for things, that's the problem. I know there would be tons of bands that I would be interested in, but I never take the time to do it. I think music is not important enough in my life. But for opinion leaders, it is very different. They do engage in ongoing search. They use general information sources such as YouTube or Wikipedia, but they also use music sources, music blogs, music channels, music recommender systems, and what their current favorite artist was, and to explain me how they discovered this artist. So what's interesting is that people were almost involved in the process. So sometimes the music or artist had been introduced to them by an acquaintance, but sometimes they already knew the music, they've heard it before, but they were either indifferent to it or they didn't like it, but someone else talked about it, about this artist with them, or they listened to this music again with someone who liked it and they changed their mind. So this is a male participant who I call Grégoire. He's at the center of the sociogram. And we can see that he belongs, well, we can cluster people around him in 3 different groups. So one cluster composed of family members, another cluster composed of close school friends, and another smaller cluster of people he met when in his primary school. So Grégoire's favorite music artist band is the Black Keys. He was introduced to the Black Keys by his friend Elias, and he liked it very much. So he introduced the Black Keys to Gaspard, a school friend. And Gaspard is the music opinion leaders for the group at school. So Gaspard introduced everyone else in the group to the Black Keys, and now the whole group of friends is listening to the Black Keys. So this was not always this pattern that was flowed, but it was all very often something similar. So one person acting as a bridge between 2 distinct groups of friends, or between family and a group of friends. Well, we saw that music opinion leaders are usually perceived as being knowledgeable trustworthy. So they are knowledgeable, they have an enduring involvement with music, they perform ongoing search on music. But they should be able to model the temporal dynamics of music taste. Like some music recommender systems, such as Last.fm, has offer social networking tools. So maybe you could try to detect important changes in one social environment, like the addition in a short time span of several interconnected friends, a new romantic relationship, or new patterns of interactions between the user and his friends.